Okay, I'm back. Professor Kukral here again. And this is for my Europe class, okay? And it can also be used when we talk about Europe and world geography, but my Europe class is going to focus on that part of the world. Okay, I'm going to make some videos for you guys just watching for the first time. Here in my house, I tried to find a quiet place. I was disturbed by some animals in the last video I made. But hopefully this is a quieter place than outside. I'm trying to replicate some of my lectures. I'm trying to replicate not something totally professional like you'd find on the internet and maybe unprofessional on the internet too. But I'm just trying to give you a feeling of what it's like to be in one of my classes. That's the whole idea. What is it like to be in a class of mine at Rose-Hulman? Occasionally I might make a mistake. Let me know about it. Maybe I'll correct it if I notice it. I'll review these after I watch them and I'll let you know. But that happens in the classroom too. And I'm glad it does because not everything's perfect. I mean, geography is not a science that has only one answer. I mean, there's a lot of interpretations to human geography of the earth. And when we talk about cultures and peoples, there's not just one answer. There's lots of interpretations. Now, Europe, we're going to talk about Europe in this class. And Europe is probably one of the most fascinating places to study because the Europeans have been so powerful for about the last 500 years, right? They've colonized most of the earth. They've settled much of the earth. They've taken their ideas with them. That's cultural baggage. When they settled somewhere, they brought their language with them. What are we speaking? We're speaking English. Why? Because the English had a very powerful impact on the settlement of North America. They won. Right? And so we speak English. Other parts of the New World speak Spanish and Portuguese and French because of the dominant colonial powers that settled there, the effective settlements, okay? And we look around the world, we can see that Europe had a really heavy hand, okay, for a long, long time, till the mid-20th century. Look at the boundaries of African countries. Those were decided by Europeans. They were drawn up by Europeans without any regard for the people or culture in that part of the world. And the ways of life, religion, philosophy, laws, educational systems, most of these were brought by Europeans wherever they went. So how can we study about Europe? How do we start? Well, we have to look at the big picture sometimes. We can't look at the minutia, the small stuff, okay? We got 10 weeks. We're going to look at some of the big stuff with Europe, okay? And the first thing to do is to think about the map of Europe. And all you got to do is look at one. And I hope you get one out. And there's a lot in the textbook. But just, I used to tell students, get a map of Europe and pin it up in your bathroom or somewhere so you have to look at it all the time, okay? And if you were in my class on campus, I'd give you some map quizzes on it. But that's okay. We're not going to do that this quarter. They're sort of fun. But you guys can learn it. I mean, you can look up anything you want on a map. Why should you memorize it? The only reason to memorize something is it gives you a sense of thinking about places and their relative location in relation to other things. You know that if you think about Germany and know where Germany's located, you know that it's bordered by 8 different countries. That's a lot to share borders with. Things like that. I think it's bordered by 8. But how do we break down Europe? Where do we start? Well, we break it down with some macro regions, with some big regions that have distinctive identities. So when we look at the map, we see Europe as not a distinctive continent like South America or Australia, but we see it as a peninsula of Asia, of the big Eurasian landmass, and we see Europe jutting out as a peninsula and a series of peninsulas. No one's very far from the sea in Europe. You're close to water, you're close to mountains. Those two things all the time in Europe. Within a couple hundred miles of water and ocean, okay? Water, oceans, and mountains, I should say. All right? So when we look at Europe, first of all, there is the continent of Europe, or continental Europe. That's the mainland. That's the countries like, what? France, Germany, Poland, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, Serbia, Bosnia. This is the continent. Okay, and when people talk about continental Europe, continental studies, this is what they're talking about. Continental philosophy, stuff like that. They're talking about the continent. All right, that's different than what? How about the British Isles? The British Isles are another region, and they see themselves as distinctively different. Okay, the British Isles, two islands, right? Ireland and Great Britain, those two islands. And they have a distinctive culture and a distinctive history that a lot of times has separated them from the continent. Think what's going on right now, right? Leaving the EU, Brexit. Why? Why? Think about it. We're going to talk about that later, and I want you to think about it as well. But the British have always thought of themselves as sort of special, separate from Europeans. They don't think of themselves so much as Europeans as they think about themselves as being British. Okay? And really, it's not till the 20th century that when they lost their status, global power. Beginning of the 20th century, they were the world power. Okay, the British. By mid-20th century, they were bankrupt. World War II destroyed that power. And so, the idea of being British sort of declined, and they had to do more with Europe. They had to become part of Europe. But we have the continent. Let's review. We have the continent. We have the British Isles. And what's up north? How about Scandinavia? Beautiful part of the world, Scandinavia. I've spent a lot of time there, especially in Norway. You got the Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Iceland. Okay, they're sort of separate. You can throw Finland in there too, and even Estonia if you want. Okay, they're sort of separate because the continent of Europe and the British Isles, most of those areas developed what? How did the culture emerge there? A lot of it came out of being part of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire and the Celts and other people had a lot to do with the culture that emerged on the continent. When we go up to Scandinavia, we're looking at a different group of gods and mythology. We're looking at the Vikings. We're looking at Norse mythology or Nordic mythology. Very different than the Greek and Roman gods. Okay? So a whole different culture emerged, and it's very low population up north in Scandinavia. That's another thing. And a harsher environment that people had to adapt to. Okay, up in Scandinavia, with a lot of times very poor soils. So they relied more on the seas and oceans. Okay, but they were the great navigators and explorers. They came to North America 400 years before Christopher Columbus. Everybody knows that. That's been proven now. Okay, they didn't stay though. They could have stayed. We'd all be speaking Norwegian or Danish or something. But they didn't stay. They went back. They went back and forth a few times. But when I talk about settlement and colonization, you have to look at who was the most effective and who was permanent and who had the impact. Okay? And that's a little bit different. But Scandinavia is a distinctive region of Europe too. So you got the continent, you have the British Isles, and you have Scandinavia. Okay? Those are three big land areas that are separated by water. Mostly. Denmark sort of forms a bridge into continental Europe, bordering Germany for Scandinavia. All right. And then there's to the east, Russia. Now, Russia is an odd thing. We're going to talk about Russia, but when the Soviet Union existed, Russia was sort of far removed from Europe because it was isolated. It had a different economic system, a different type of political system than most of Europe, and so the world became divided in the Cold War, and Russia, the Soviet Union, was a sort of a separate entity. Today we see the Russians as, again, an important part of Europe. They always have been. Europe would be very different without Russia in its history. The Russian people are definitely European people. As we go further east, we go into Russian Asia, Northern Asia, and we have a multi-ethnic country, Russia, with lots of different ethnic groups in Asia, that part of Russia that's in Asia, and the European part of Russia as well. So it's a distinctively different part too. We could talk about the Mediterranean region of Europe. 3 peninsulas, right, make up the Mediterranean. You have the Iberian Peninsula. What's in the Iberian Peninsula? Spain, Portugal, Andorra. Okay, beautiful places to visit. Everyone should visit that part of Europe. Separated by the Pyrenees Mountains, you get down into the Iberian Peninsula. And then in the middle of Europe, when you go south, what do you hit? The Italian Peninsula. Okay, so you're down in the Italian Peninsula, which is at the center of the Apennine Mountains, separating either coast of Italy. Looks like a boot, everybody says, right? Well, I don't know about that, but you got the Italian Peninsula. And then you go east, what do you have there? Where you have Greece. You have the Ionian Sea. And Some people call this the Balkan Peninsula, which is probably the best name for it because the word Balkan, Balkan, means mountains in Turkish. And this area is extremely mountainous, the Balkan Peninsula, going down through Serbia and Bosnia and Macedonia and Montenegro and Bulgaria and Greece. What did I forget? Albania is down there as well. That's the Balkan Peninsula. So you got the Balkan Peninsula, the Italian Peninsula, and you have the Iberian Peninsula in the southwest. Okay? So that's a distinctive part of Europe too. But think about, let's review that again. There's the continent, and then there's the British Isles, and then there's Scandinavia, then there's Russia, then the Mediterranean world. Those are sort of some distinctive areas. We start to break up Europe by culture. Pretty soon we're going to talk about language, and we can talk about the big three groups, the Slavic languages, the Romance languages, and the, what did I forget, Germanic languages, right? Those three sort of divide Europe into major cultures as well. Well, I'm going to stop this video because we're told keep them to 10 minutes or less because you guys will just shut us off. So I'm going to make another one, and I'm going to talk about introduce languages of Europe as a way of introducing culture. All right? So hold on. Let's see what's coming up. Bye-bye.